I'm actually really most proud of the communities that have developed around the Schvitz and the convent and Dutch Girl for that matter. I really probably more than anything else love seeing people work together and accomplish things together. It's a beautiful life. I'm super grateful that I have it and that it sort of informs, I think, who I am and what I'm about. Yeah.
Paddy Lynch, I wanted to find the guy and talk to the guy who bought and rehabbed and reopened just recently Dutch Girl Donuts. And you're like, let's meet at the Schvitz and talk about it. Because I think it's really important when we start talking when we're in place. Mm-hmm. This is an amazing place, but it's also part of the huge story that you have of finding historical places and rehabbing them.
Yeah, I bought my old house. I lovingly refer to it as the Money Pit. 13 years ago.
That's the Kresge mansion.
Yeah, Stanley Kresge lived there from 1934 to 1974. So the Sebastian Kresge home, which is on Boston Boulevard and unbelievably spectacular, that's where Stanley grew up. And then in his 30s moved to the house that I live in. So he didn't build it, but that's where he lived for 40 years. And I bought that when I was 27 and was immediately in over my head. But I just developed this fetish for money pits. And
all right, you could say fetish for money pits, or you could say real intense admiration for historical things. And where did that come from? Because a lot of people, of course, know your family and know you. You're a funeral director. You're third generation, part of the Lynch family.
Yep. So I still go to the funeral home every day. Had a funeral this morning. In many ways, I feel like that keeps me grounded and is sort of like the foundational main foundational aspect of my life. But my parents always were doing, we lived in an old house for a number of years when I was growing up, and the old radiators and boilers and leaks. And I saw my parents live through that and actually thought it was kind of cool that they were willing to take that on. So when people ask me, like, why do you have such a love for this stuff? I can blame them, and I can do so with pride. So the house is just a mile from here, and it was not long after I bought the house and started working on it that my very good friend, Ara Harani, Amin Harani's son, who's the studio, Harani Studios is just here on East Grand Boulevard, he introduced me to the Schvitz because his dad used to come here back in the day.
100-year-old bathhouse.
Yeah, 100-year-old bathhouse. It had a reputation. I mean, this is probably 2012. And so I remember I think it was either a Wednesday or Thursday night, the old timers, men only. I think it was a Thursday night. Or I was like, we got to go in there. I've told the story many times, of course. He's like, we got to check it out. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go in there, man. Like, I didn't really know. I hung out in the saunas. I was a college football player. So that was kind of part of our like recovery and sports medicine thing. But like the Schvitz culture, I didn't know.
The social nature of it.
Yeah, the social nature of it and like the deep Eastern European Jewish roots, all of that I didn't really grow up with. So we come in and the place didn't look quite as nice as it does today. And it was a little bit dingy. And we walk down the long hallway into this area actually. And we find like 8 or 10 old Russian and Jewish guys eating steaks in their robes, drinking vodka, smoking joints. And we were like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is our place. It's in our neighborhood. It's not like we could have walked here, And so I just started coming every week, and I actually found it to be quite cathartic, and the funeral home sort of respected the fact, and they still do, that every Wednesday night I'm here for about 4 hours, and unless it's a total emergency and they call the landline, they leave me alone. And it's been really nice to have that sort of weekly ritual and respite. And it was the whole thing was built upon the Sabbath and Shabbat. I mean, that's why the guys would come here originally, 100 years ago. And so anyway, I developed a love for the place, and funeral service can be quite sad and stressful, and I found a little bit of a relief here. So anyway,
and that's when you decided to buy it and rehab it.
Not really, and I won't bore you with the whole story because it's too long, but I had no intention of buying it. I didn't even really know it was for sale. It was never really listed for sale, but I developed a friendship with the old caretaker, Daniel. And really what opened my eyes. I was in New York and I was visiting my sister, who's a singer like my mom, so she was at the Met, and I was out there with a few friends, and one of them was like, Paddy, have you ever been to the Russian and Turkish baths in the East Village, which are famous Eastern European baths in New York from like the 1890s? And I was like, no. She's like, you go to the Schvitz every week and it's a dump. She goes, let's go check out the famous baths in New York City. And I went, and it was like young, old, black, white, busy, cosmopolitan, like all these things. And it really opened my eyes. I was like, maybe Detroit could have like a little bit of a renaissance at the Schvitz, So then that's when I called Daniel and was like, do you think it would work? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, you can't abandon me. And so he stayed on.
He's with you in lockstep now and making sure that everything still works properly.
Which is not easy.
No, I'm sure not. So how many people do you have coming through here?
So it's busier in the winter. One of the reasons why we want to put in a small outdoor pool next year is because that'll keep us busier year round. But in the winter, the busiest part of the season, we will average about 1,000 visitors a week. Yeah.
What's the most interesting connection that you've seen among people here?
Well, I think I always tell people, and it takes them by surprise, in many ways, the female clientele have become the backbone of the business because we have women only twice a week and it's extremely busy, and it's become this sort of place for them, not unlike the way that the men have enjoyed it for decades, a place for them to have their own time and space and take care of each other, lots of, wellness and spa services and things like that. And so seeing that come alive has been really, really interesting. And then I think just seeing the way that it attracts so many people from so many different walks of life. I mean, we get people from driving from Toledo, from Ann Arbor, certainly from all the Metro Detroit suburbs. And, it's not a real like fancy or elitist place. You've got people who are, some of the older Jewish guys that have been coming for years are multimillionaires, but they'll sit down and have a meal with a first generation Ukrainian mechanic from Hamtramck. And it's like, everybody's cool. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's important because our society and our culture, I think, is not providing those spaces as much as they used to, or people aren't figuring out ways to find them. Like, I don't think our neighborhoods or faith communities or, fraternal organizations are necessarily as strong as they used to be. And so I think a lot of people are hungry for a level of connection that goes beyond what they experience online or just like waving at their neighbor as they drive out of the driveway,
Absolutely. And I think I kind of want to dig into a little bit even then the historical background of the whole thing. So it would make total sense to me that if you're rehabbing this old home, you're rehabbing the Schvitz, again, with so much history, and now you're with Dutch Girl.
Yeah.
And what is it about keeping the richness of the past in a connection, like in a place where people totally bond, whether it is the Schvitz or it's donuts, or it's admiring something from the past and not bulldozing it?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is rooted in my life as a funeral director and growing up around grief and history and storytelling and
is it fragility of life? Is it just seeing life playing out in front of you?
It could be like a little bit of trauma. Like I had a lady friend years ago that said, you might be a bit traumatized by like the fact that everybody dies, but these buildings, you can make an effort to keep them going,
What do you think about that?
I mean, there could be some truth to it. And I'm a super sentimental, nostalgic guy in general. I mean, I think I'm the son of a funeral director and an opera singer. So like, whatever that means, it's somehow, put me on a path where I love the experience of like living the history of it. Like to see this place as busy as it probably was in like the 30s and 40s just brings me an enormous sense of joy. And like to see Dutch Girl, where I grew up going since I was a little boy, to see it close and now to see a line out the door again, it just is like, I don't know, there's something magical about that experience. And I also just really, really, really love the people that I work with at the funeral home here, like seeing teams of people come together that care equally about history and, community and connection. That to me is really important. And yeah, all of it though, funerals I've often said are really about community, ritual, and catharsis. Like everybody's trying to figure something out, or at least give themselves some type of relief. And that's really why people come to the Schvitz. Yeah. And I've said it before and people think I'm kidding, but I'm not. Like the Schvitz in a lot of ways is like the funeral home without any dead bodies. You have to offer hospitality. People are coming from all different socioeconomic and religious realities to be here together, to emote or let go in some capacity. And I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It is. And I didn't know that until about 6 months to a year into owning it. I was sitting here with my good friend, Brad, who's worked here over the years too. And I was looking around at like just all the different characters. And I said it like lovingly. I was like, man, what a group of freaks, Mm-hmm. And I use that word like lovingly. And he goes, yeah, man, they all come here to heal. And that really has stayed with me because I think there's a lot of truth to it. And like every human being today, especially, is dealing with pain and stress and anxiety. Mm-hmm. I mean, COVID really revealed that to us too. And so everybody's dealing with something.
Yeah, I think you're really looking into humanity and the rawness that it's just what you said about when you've got the millionaire sitting next to the mechanic, that we all walk the same path, whether it's in grief and whether it is trying to find connection.
Right. And I studied English and theology. I felt very fortunate to do so with the Jesuits at Boston College. And when you spend time like studying, suffering and pain and how we react to that at a very, very like esoteric level, you can start to feel like this doesn't make sense or I'm living in a bubble. And so, whereas like funeral service is the opposite of that, like someone has died and we have to get this body out of a house and eventually into the ground or into a fire. Mm-hmm. And it's so visceral. And I think that the dichotomy between trying, as a young man, thinking about things, in sort of, I don't know, in like sort of a philosophical or esoteric way, and then coming into the reality of life where, people die and people suffer and people deal with pain in a really concrete way. I see that here at the Schvitz too, where like, our bodies are what we are embodied people. Our bodies are what hold pain and hold stress. Mm-hmm. And people come here to try to let go of some of it.
I feel that you also see so much joy though, or that you can appreciate so much joy because of all of the suffering that you have seen as well. And so it's a really hard left turn to say donuts are joyful.
Yeah. It isn't. Donuts are like a total source of joy that only costs $2.
Exactly. But you have this such extreme experience, which is like what I think is so interesting because you are truly immersed in all of the feelings, in all aspects of your life.
Right. And grief, is complicated. Sometimes grief, it reveals itself as anger or relief or confusion. And so, so all of that I think has led to, I've said it too, everybody has sort of their idea of what a funeral director may or may not be. But one thing that I've experienced is that almost every funeral director that I know has a tremendous sense of humor. And I don't think that's coincidental. I think that in order to deal with what we deal with every day, it's a coping mechanism. You have to be able to laugh. You have to be able to find joy in the everyday stuff.
In the little things. Because again, you have to know how to be present for people at probably the worst points of their life.
Right. Yeah. And that's like 90% of the job is just being present, like quite literally just being willing to sit in that room, because most people don't want to do that.
No.
Or whatever. So yeah, it's a beautiful life. I'm super grateful that I have it, and that it sort of informs, I think, who I am and what I'm about. Yeah.
You know, when you read everything that went into then you purchasing and rehabbing Dutch Girl donuts, it would seem to make, of course, Paddy would buy that. Again, with the connection with family and the history of it all.
Yeah, I mean, what's really remarkable is my dad started taking me in there as a little boy. My mom went to Mary Grove, and so when they were dating in the 70s, he was in there like a lot. And so before I can even remember, he was bringing me in there. So it was sort of part of my childhood. But the incredible part of the story is that my cousin, Tim Lynch, also a funeral director, there's about 20 of us that work in funeral service. He grew up with the Timmer family, the founding family of Dutch Girl, and he handled funeral services for Cecilia, the original Dutch Girl, and her son and daughter-in-law. And I didn't even know that. I mean, it wasn't until, a couple years ago that I realized there were these connections. And he was the one, he said to them at some point, you should talk to my cousin about this. He was like, lives in the city and loves, history and knows Dutch Girl really well. And then he was saying to me, would you be interested? And at that point, I was like, it wasn't on my radar. I was like, I don't have the capacity for that. But when I found out it was going to be closed potentially for good and just no longer be Dutch Girl Donuts, that's when I went to my wife, who's much smarter than me.
And you're like, now hang on, hear me out on this one.
She'll tell me when it's a really, really bad idea. To her credit, she grew up in Detroit. She knows Dutch Girl, and she gave me permission. She goes, that's actually not a bad idea, Paddy. You can pursue that.
Green light, we got it.
Yeah. So I'm super grateful for her support in that way. And it's just been, I knew that people were going to be excited about it. I honestly, because we've been open about a week now, I literally had no idea. I mean, there's been a line down the block every day, all day. It's just extraordinary. I mean, just hundreds and thousands of donuts.
Yeah.
It's cool.
When you went in to rehab, what did you keep? What did you have to change? What kind of went through your mind in terms of, was there pressure to make sure it was the same?
Yeah. Well, I one of the reasons why I think the Timmers trusted me with it, because they received something like 30 or 40 offers, and they had people being like, it should be franchised immediately. Like, we're going to move it. Like, we'll keep the Dutch Girl name, but we'll move it somewhere else. So they were getting all sorts of ideas from different people. And I basically said, hey, my thing is like, I don't want anything to change, which I think they liked.
I like my spot.
Yeah, I like my custard filled and my glaze. And it's part of my commute. When I moved to Detroit, Woodward became my daily commute to the funeral home. So I would stop in to Dutch Girl, often on the way to the funeral home, and pick up a dozen for everybody. But no, what we did when we got in there, after 2+ years of being shut down, unfortunately, it got broken into a couple times. It was pretty trashed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we're never going to have the opportunity to address some of these things once we get up and running. There's too much. There'll be too much activity. So we probably opened about 2 months later than I would have originally thought. But we replaced almost all of the equipment, polished the terrazzo floors, repainted the whole place, new lighting. What we kept were the original, tables, like the wood donut tables, and got them all refurbished, and they look beautiful. So I feel like we kept what we needed to keep and what was sort of essential to the history of the place, but then also upgraded what needed to be upgraded. And then the most important part is the people. Every single person working there basically right now is a former employee.
Oh, so they're like, we're back.
It's amazing, including like the 3 main donut makers.
That's got to help with continuity for you.
It's huge. That institutional knowledge is like, it's the same thing that I was explaining here with Daniel, where I was like, I don't want to take this on without that institutional knowledge. And so that was part of the deal at Dutch Girl too, with the Timmers. I was like, I want John to stay on, the grandson who's made donuts over several years. Then there's 2 other main donut makers, Letitia and Joe, who've been there for years. They're back, and they're super happy to be back.
I bet they are.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Ben Bell, who's here with me. Ben, you want to grab that box of donuts? Is that around? and bring that over, because of course I have more questions.
There's a little bit of false advertising on this.
Ooh, all right.
So these are the original boxes, and we didn't want them to go to waste. So the phone number is now different.
The phone number's wrong.
I've been starting to cover them with stickers when I'm like delivering them to people, but new phone number, which you'll see, if you go on Google. And then the major tweak is we're open on Sundays now and closed on Mondays, which...
That's a nice shift, because people really want donuts on Sunday.
It's been a great shift so far.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Oh
there
my
they
gosh,
are.
they open it
Traditional
up.
glaze.
What were the worries that you had?
Oh, it's I don't know. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm able to pull off some of these.
Do you not worry much?
I do.
Or is worry not the word?
Yeah. I mean, I have. It's funny because in one sense, I mean, I've had friends tell me like, I just can't even believe you would be willing to take that risk. Less at the donut shop and more here.
More here?
Buying the Schvitz was like, this is 12,000 square feet, and it was becoming dilapidated. So, but like I've said it before, same thing with my house. Ironically, my house and the Schvitz, same age, same size, same condition. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people I'm sort of trauma bonded to my house. Like that's the first major project I got into.
You knew which mistakes to kind of make, or like the pitfalls. Yeah.
Taught me a lot of lessons. It also helped me start to assemble a team of trades people that I know and trust. And we got a guy for that. We got a guy for that. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, each project becomes a little bit easier because you've developed, certain knowledge. But no, I worry. I mean, in one sense, I maybe take more risks than other people would take. But at the same time, I think about it. Like, it's not like I decided in, 1 hour that I'd buy the Schvitz or Dutch Girl. Like, and thank God I have an incredibly supportive family and spouse and friends that I trust and people. I mean, nobody does anything alone.
Do you listen to your gut? Is it a gut thing for you? Because I'm gonna start to dip in.
This will be my third today. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah. Exactly. I like that. Your third. I gotta hang out with you more often, Patty.
It's so ridiculous. I'm really gonna.
This is so okay. Before we get to the risk question, describe this, because you probably have better words than I do.
Dude, for me, it's just like a little bit of heaven. I mean, it's just so good.
Classic glaze.
And classic. And one thing that's amazing, if you had asked me like a month ago, how many variety are there?
Right.
I would go in and I'd just have like the 2 or 3 that I'd usually get, or I would have said like 8 to 10. There's like over 20 variety.
Okay, clearly I wouldn't have guessed that number.
Me neither. And I think we're at about 14 or 15 right now. It's not like the full arsenal. But
is this the best seller, the glaze?
This is probably, the glazed, like in the figure 8s or the twists, which are just this glaze, they're probably the most popular. But the cake donuts are incredible.
I'm like,
it's totally fine. It's and like, it does sound sort of trite, but it's true. Like it's a little bit of joy, you know, and like
it's a lot of joy.
And like showing up to your work, thank you. Showing up to your
Ben just gave us napkins.
Yeah, well,
yes, here you go.
Thank you. Showing up to your place of work with a box of these, and it's like,
you're instantly the best.
Awesome. Yeah. And
you're that guy.
Yep. Or that gal. And
that's right.
No, so it's super accessible, and people just. You're tasting history too. These have basically been made the same way since 1947 on Woodward Avenue. So
tastes amazing.
You're sort of transported in time, and
which is so cool.
It is cool. Do you want me to?
So,
do you want me? Time to go over another one.
We're gonna keep that open.
Ben, did you have one yet? Okay, yeah, good.
Okay. Do you listen to your gut?
Yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah.
Because some people, when entrepreneurs, business owners, and again, you have a range of things.
Yeah.
Some might be like, I make snap decisions, I don't look back, or I consult 20 people, I spreadsheet it out and do it. I'm really interested in decision making.
I'll tell a story that I think maybe will do a good job at explaining this. give you a good example. So my wife and I own an old convent on Mound that's part of Transfiguration's historic
That
campus.
wasn't on my bingo card.
Yeah, so we own an old convent, and I'll tell the story. So I think it was basically during COVID. I so I love looking at like the properties that pop up around the city, and Irish Catholic guy, grew up, around convents and rectories and churches. So this old convent that I had admired in the past comes up for sale. And I don't always tell my wife like right away, because she'll be like, oh, no.
You got to workshop it first.
So I'm like, our really good friend and real estate agent, I hit him up. I go, let's go see this thing, okay? And she gets wind, okay? And she, to her credit, she's at least like, I'll go check it out, okay? It's whatever, it's 5 minutes away. So we go in there, and it reminds me immediately of my dorm at Boston College, because it's basically a big dorm with a chapel and everything. And I'm immediately trying to crunch numbers in my head about how we could just basically get young people that we know in their 20s and 30s who might be willing to like rent a room instead of live in a semi-commune dorm thing. Yeah. But we just to figure out a way to like cash flow it, because I don't want to see it fall apart or whatever. So I was like, well, we have so many friends and people we know, we can get people to live in here for $500 a month or whatever. And she's like, that is the worst idea you've ever come up with. She's like, who would want to own a dorm? Like they'll be partying and like sleeping with each other, and it'll be like, well, we don't need this. Yeah. I'm like, you're right. To her credit. And I could tell it was pulling at her heartstrings a little bit, because she grew up in Southwest Detroit and had Polish nuns growing up, and helped educate their family out of poverty. And so I could tell that she wasn't totally against this building. And she goes, Paddy, we know so many artists, and we know so many wellness practitioners from like the Schvitz, who are usually either popping up or mobile, or maybe they have to work from their own home, which a lot of them didn't like. She goes, we basically have 20 small studios here. She goes, just make it studio and office space for all these people we know, so they don't have to live here.
They could come and do their practice there,
like
whatever
a business
they need.
incubator.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's what we have. We have about 20 people there, half wellness, half art. And it's incredible. She has her ceramic studio there. And it's really, really cool. The convent's super cool. But that's an example of me sort of having a gut feeling and wanting to maybe see something happen, but then relying on people who are smarter than me to be like, it's not a totally terrible idea, but why don't you look at it from this direction? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's an example of kind of like the process.
It's really interesting because you're filling a need that maybe people don't totally see. What are you most proud of, Paddy?
I'm actually most proud. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that. I'm actually really most proud of the communities that have developed around the Schvitz and the convent and Dutch Girl, for that matter. I really, probably more than anything else, love seeing people work together and accomplish things together. I mean, and that's really, again, that's the nature of funeral service. You can't move a body alone. Very rarely. You usually need two, sometimes three. And so I lived in Haiti after my undergrad for a while before going to mortuary school. And the Haitians had a saying, "Men en pile chez pas loup." It's Creole for "many hands lighten the load." And so I think I'm really proud that there's like, I don't know, the Schvitz probably had like 3 people working for it 10 years ago. And now there's probably like 20 staff members. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I love.
Yeah,
I love to see that growth.
Community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We can't wait to see what's next. What's next on the
I
rehab list? Your wife is like, yep, no.
She literally said the other day, you're not allowed to buy anything else. She said that. And I was like,
so she's just you're just going to settle with 3 donuts a day then?
Probably with donuts. We could open up other Dutch Girls. There's talk of that. That could be really cool. We do have, and we're really proud of it. We bought a place in Lexington, north of Port Huron.
Absolutely.
And that's Schvitz North. So the private party demand became so extreme during COVID here, and we only have one slot a week, that now we built a gorgeous sauna on the lake. And so people can book Schvitz North for their private party or group, and most days are 2 or 3 nights. But that's been incredible to see the demand here sort of get shifted an hour north, and it's a true retreat, 4 acres on the lake with a gorgeous sauna. And my wife and I, we try to get up there when we can, but the truth is we're sort of too busy to get up there more than like once every couple of months. But other people get to enjoy it, and you can't book it through Airbnb or any of those platforms. You can only book it through Schvitz Detroit. So it's sort of like our community of people that use it.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy about that, because everybody's got to get away a little bit or try. We all live pretty busy lives. So.
Creating quite a legacy for your girls.
Oh yeah. I know, right? They're funny. They're 1.5 years and 5 months, Dottie and Bernie, Dorothy and Bernadette. And people joke with us. They're like, oh man, they're going to have some serious exposure to a lot of different types of people, which I think is great.
Which is wonderful.
I mean, Dorothy's been running around the Schvitz since basically since the day she was born. And anyway, it's cool. There's a lot of wonderful people in this city, and in this whole metro area. And I'm super grateful to be a part of it, so.
Well, we're grateful we had the time with you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for donuts.
And thanks for being at the Schvitz.